Good afternoon, Neil. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. Nice to see you, Haydon.
No, it's great to see you today, and thank you for coming and spending the time with me to talk through your fund today. Before we get cracking, I'm just going to do a quick introduction to anyone that's viewing this today. As you are hopefully aware, Good Green Money, we're ethical IFA firm, financial advice firm. We try to seek out the best, good quality, ethical funds that are out there, and the Artemis Positive Future Fund is a prime example of a great fund. Let me just give you a quick introduction to Artemis and who they are. They're a UK investment fund. Started life back in 1997. I remember all the adverts everywhere in all the financial press about Artemis back then when that all happened. They started life building conventional funds. They've moved into the ethical space, or ESG, as the term seems to have come to the fore in recent years. So that's all about environmental, social, and governance issues. They are United Nations signatories to their Principles of Responsible Investment. Bit of a mouthful, PRI, but this is where you integrate ESG principles within your investment process. So my firm as investment house is really keen to see this type of stuff built in to anyone that we invest with. They've got offices in London and Edinburgh, 29 partners, including Neil, who's kindly speaking to me today. And the Positive Future Fund is run by 4 fund managers: Neil Goddin, Ryan Smith, Craig Bonthram, and Jonathan Parsons. So there you go. That's my intro. What do you think, Neil? Have I got that about right?
You have, yeah. That was spot on, as they say. Yeah, perfect.
Good. Right, let's turn to your fund. Your fund, there's lots of information about it, about what it's trying to do. But one of the phrases that I've picked out in particular is that you try to identify companies that are creating transformational change in the world. I think that word transformational is really important, isn't it? I mean, tell me a bit about this. What is the sort of overall ethos of your fund? What are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, one sentence that could sum it up is small companies trying to solve the big problems of the world today, is the way I phrase it, in 2 main areas: protecting the environment and enhancing people's lives. So within protecting the environment, we're looking to invest in companies that are helping to solve the big problems: climate change, top of the list, pollution control, biodiversity loss, all the stuff that you'd expect, all the issues that you're reading about and your viewers are reading about in the papers every day around the climate and the environment. So we're focusing on companies that are helping solve problems around where we're getting our energy usage from, getting rid of fossil fuels, that type of thing, to put it simply, clearing up some of the mess that humans have left in terms of plastic waste, etc. Trying to correct some of the massive loss of the number of animals and fauna that we're losing every year at the moment. So we're focusing there as well. And then on the enhancing people's lives, it's largely education and healthcare. One thing that's common across those areas, but all the stocks that we look for, we're looking for improvements at lower costs. So we're looking at things that reduce costs in the healthcare industry, but also improve people's lives at the same time. In education, we're looking for cheaper education that will mean that more people can go to school, more people can go to university right across the world. You're looking at focusing on, the inclusionary bias that is there at the moment, or exclusionary bias that is there often against people from different backgrounds. It's hard to get education sometimes, sadly, if you're from certain countries or a certain demographic background. So the more inclusionary the world can be, the better for us.
I mean, this is just absolutely spot on in terms of the things that our clients look for. I looked at the mix of your underlying investments, and you've got an awful lot of funds there on the social side, helping people's lives, and environmental as well. You roughly split 50-50 there. So, I mean, this is fantastic. Later on, we'll talk about some examples. But before we move into that, I mean, one of the things that a really good ethical fund involves itself with is engagement, is stewardship, is questioning these businesses you invest in. this is something that's very important to you guys, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a critical part of the process. I've never met a perfect company, and that's really important. So whatever the company does, there's engagement, and the vast majority of companies appreciate that too. I think one thing we're really privileged with is we don't exclusively invest in small and mid-cap companies, but we do largely invest in those areas, and that means we get really good exposure to company management, to questions being answered, and we take advantage of that and interact with these companies. First and foremost, we focus on companies with a good product. So we're not necessarily engaging like you may do with a fossil fuel company to try and get them to burn less fossil fuels. We don't own any fossil fuel companies, we never will. So it's not that type of engagement, but it is still very important to engage on lots of issues. I mean, the key issues we engage on most frequently are diversity and climate action. Even the companies we own, we want to see net zero policies coming in over the next, already in place or coming in over the next few years. And so they're the type of things we're often engaging on.
Okay, so when you're going through I know that you've got a detailed selection process, either a net zero policy that's there in place, or you talk to management and they can give you some reassurance that it's on the way, is fundamental to you guys then in terms of how you're selecting companies.
Absolutely, yeah. It's something we want off of all of our companies. I mean, there's laws coming into place that you need to have a 2050 policy anyway, but really we're aiming for better than that. We want a good slug of our portfolio to be, aiming for 2030s type levels. And we've got some companies that are already net zero or better, but it's a big focus for us, definitely.
And in terms of the size of business that you would typically invest in and the type of business, would you invest in the big major players or the minnows or sort of the mid-cap stuff? And do you look at the ones that are heading for growth? Or give me a feel. What's the typical type of business that you would go for once they've gone through your sort of ethical selection?
Yeah, so assuming they fit the right profile in terms of solving protecting the environment or enhancing people's lives, the sort of red line is they must make money. They must have some sales. So we never invest pre-revenue. That's one line that we don't go past. So we're trying to prevent ourselves, having to wait years for some revenue that may or may not come in. Stock trying to solve some sort of cancer or whatever it may be, or some problem. Solid state batteries, I think they've been on the way for every year for the last 10 years. So that's our red line to try and prevent us. We always look for companies that are growing above the market. Round numbers, the market's expected to grow at 7 to 8% most years. So we're looking for growth above that. So we are definitely a growth biased fund, unapologetically, probably the most growth biased fund out there in the UK market today. We don't have a rule that says we are small and mid cap or we are large cap, but our fund tends to be biased away from large and mega cap. Couple of reasons why. Often the growth's not there. Often when you talked about transformational change earlier, that's very important to us. We think that's what's going to solve these problems. It's battery electric vehicles. It's not a more efficient combustion engine. It's that type of argument that we're constantly having with each other and the companies we're looking for. So that tends not to happen in the incumbents. It's hard for a combustion engine company to disrupt itself with a battery electric vehicle company. History says it's not the way things happen. It's a new player that comes along that disrupts, which is exactly what you've seen with Tesla. So we own companies up to the size of Tesla, but on average, if you took a median market cap, it would be 10 billion or just below that. But we're not afraid to own some large caps if we still believe they're in the disruption phase. But the disruption tends to happen in small and mid caps rather than the large caps in general.
Oh, no, thanks for that. That's given some real colour to this, and I think it's adding to the fact that this has got some clout here. It's really good. It's really good. It's exactly the type of stuff that our clients would be interested in investing in. So thank you for adding that bit of colour. We've spoken about a theory. Let's touch upon a few examples as we may. I tried to look at an example of a company that's good for the planet, environmental stuff, as we mentioned. A second example that's more around people, society positive. And then if possible, one that covers both. And we've got a couple of examples here. If we start with the planet example, Swedish heat pumps, Neeb Industries. Tell me a bit about them and why you're invested with those guys.
Yeah, so Neeb are a heat pump company. For people who don't know what heat pumps are, there's a couple of different versions of heat pumps, but essentially they take advantage of heat that's already around your house to heat your house. So it can be from the air or it can be from the ground. So there is a certain amount of heat in the ground. You put a heat pump in and the heat pump will suck that heat and heat your house and potentially your water too. There's some thoughts out there that around 75% of the heat that's produced for a house today can be produced by the heat pump, with 25% still being electricity. The electricity is used to top up the heat pump and also run the motors. So if you're using 100% electricity to heat your house today, if you put up a heat pump, you'd be using 75% less. When you think about things that have happened over the recent years and months in terms of energy costs, that sounds quite attractive just from a cost perspective. And then obviously, it's attractive from a environmental perspective because you're using less of the grid, and the grid is still dirty today, and there's lots of pressures on it. So the less electricity we need to get from the grid, the better it is. So Neeb focus exclusively, a big slug of their business is focused exclusively on heat pumps. They grew up over sort of the last 30 years, largely in areas like Scandinavia, where ground source heat pumps were really important because it's cold. So heat pumps have always been attractive where it's really cold. And what's nice about the ground temperature is, even if it's a minus temperature above the ground, it doesn't often get cold below the ground. So even if it's the depths of winter, you can still use a ground source heat pump in these cold countries. But today you are seeing heat pumps, in 2022, you're seeing heat pumps growth, rise very aggressively. I mean, there's reasons out there. There's been, lots of subsidies and government help has arrived, and more is coming. And, there are some political issues out there as well in terms of Russia and Ukraine that are causing much excitement in this area. I guess in one way you can think about it as it's a bit of a shame, but the reality is that's how disruption works. It's, when we're talking about climate change that might happen in a generation or two's time, people don't react, but when their pocket starts to hurt, the reaction comes. And you're seeing that now. You're seeing heat pump growth across the US, across Europe, 30 to 50% for the industry, and you think of the backdrop, and that's probably going to be there for the next 3 to 5 years, aggressive growth. There's no going back now. We are moving away from fossil fuels, and we're moving away from fossil fuels faster than we ever had. And largely, security of where you get your energy is so vital now. It's just been highlighted by these many issues, and that's just great for the environment. And heat pumps are one of the best ways we can reduce our exposure to fossil fuels. So the negatives are that a heat pump costs a bit more to put in than a boiler, but now the costs come down a lot once you put it in, basically. So I mean, these are great pieces of kit, cheaper over any sort of long-term period, much better for the environment, and you're using an energy source that is just sitting there. It's they call it geothermal. It's just in the ground or in the air. What a perfect way to heat your house.
Yeah, I mean, the whole discussion around energy transition is such an in-depth one, and it's absolutely come to the fore in recent years that heat pumps are a major part of the solution. So thank you for explaining on that. That's useful to know, and a really good company that's making a good difference. So That's good. That's good. I wrote an article many years ago about energy security, and it's sad to see that, and what a risk it is, and developments that have happened, how that's so come to the fore. It's just tragic. So we need businesses like this. We need them. We all need them. So it's great that you're investing in them. We'll move on to a second example, a people example. I think this company is a really good example. Amplifon. Tell me all about Amplifon. What are they all about?
So if you take a step back, Amplifon is a hearing aid business. It was set up in Milan by an Englishman directly after the Second World War. So obviously there was lots of people, lots of soldiers that came back after the war that were deaf because of all the noises in the war. So it was a big business back then. What you're seeing today, why we're interested, is there are some tailwinds. They're quite obvious. We're as a race, we're getting older, we're living longer. Your hearing tends to go when you get older. So there is a massive tailwind for the whole hearing industry over many years to come as the population ages. But also, and the more sad, that's a good reason to need more hearing aids. Unfortunately, the other reason isn't so positive. It's, a lot of people wear headphones and music is played far too loud, and there could be billions of people that need hearing aids in the future because of this problem, and it's a fairly new one in terms of the history of humans. The amount we use earphones today, our kids use earphones, so again, two very positive tailwinds for the industry. But you could quite rightly ask me, but they're not new, and what's transformational about Amplifon? They're just shops on the high street, which is a fair cop. But what's really exciting to us and why we're invested, and we expect to be invested for the long term, is like a lot of these industries, there's been some behaviours by some of the key players in these industries. I think it's the same in eyewear as well, where these products are really expensive and they don't necessarily need to be when you look at the margins these companies make. And Amplifon have had enough of that too. So they used to just be a shop. You just went there, you got your ears checked, and you bought a product from someone else, and it was around £2,000 would be the starting price. Very expensive. A lot of people can't afford it. You can't always get, hearing aids on the NHS. You've got to be at a certain level, etc., etc. So Amplifon came out with their own brand, which they're putting into their shops today. This hearing aid is better than the other versions out there at the same sort of levels, and is around a quarter to a third of the price of the traditional way. They also offer hearing as a service, where there's an AI model and an app on your phone, and it will adjust itself to the hearing that you need. It will learn when you hear certain sounds, and when you don't hear others, it helps you a lot. So they've got this really exciting new product that is helping and is much more inclusionary. And like many of these healthcare issues, there's obvious benefits to the person wearing a hearing aid. We all get that. It's more inclusionary if you can hear. Yes, great. That's good for the person and good for anyone who gets included in society. But actually, the cost of a hearing aid pays for itself so much more than just the cost in terms of to society. If people can't hear and they can't get included, they can't get a job, and the actual cost to society are way higher than just getting them a hearing aid. And that's what you're starting to see now. You're starting to see much more of a focus, and it's slow and it's gradual, on total costs of healthcare. So if people go to the hospital less, if people, can hear more, if their insulin is kept at a steady state for diabetics and they don't have so many hypo events, that's cheaper than sending them going to hospital, as well as their lives getting better. So we have a constant focus on companies that are producing products that are making things cheaper and better, cheaper for society and better for the patients. That's where we focus, and Amplifon's a great example of that. A cheaper product that is better than the one out there today often, and is also bringing less burden to society by including more people, allowing more people in more countries to be able to have a hearing aid that couldn't afford one today.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, as first thought, you would think, okay, hearing aid is a hearing aid, which is a good thing, but then that's some really good in-depth detail there. As I understand it as well, the most modern ones have Bluetooth links as well. So if you're so inclined, you can play music directly into your head, which I don't know whether it would be a good thing or a bad thing, but that's is there.
It certainly is a good sound, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it is. Okay, that was a good second example. Let's move on to this third example. As I said earlier, I'd like to go through an example that's positive for people and the planet. This next example, Alphen, very obvious environmental benefits along similar themes to NIBE. And anyone that's watching this, if you're interested in looking that up, that's NIBE. Alphen, but it's also got a positive benefit for people because it's how to make access to renewable energy better for all of us. I don't want to steal your thunder. Tell me about Alphen.
In many ways, you've nailed it. Alphen is a company that it has two main business streams. It's adding a third one now. It's smart grids. So one of the common concerns you'll hear around battery electric vehicles, for example, is how's the grid going to cope a lot, and it's a fair concern as well. It's not an unfair. You've seen problems in Norway with everyone putting their Tesla into charge or any other electric vehicle that they may own, overnight, and them having blackouts. They call it the Tesla blackout. So it is a real problem. If everyone went to a battery electric vehicle tomorrow, the grid would struggle. So what we need is ideas that enable us to use the grid in a smarter way. So there's times of the day where it's really busy and most of the energy is created instantaneously. So if you can work out ways to use the grid in a smarter way, you can use the same grid without having to dramatically increase it to do more jobs. So a big part of their business is focused on there. Another big part of their business is focused on battery electric vehicle charging. I don't have to dwell on, we understand what our chargers going into, lots of shops and lots of blocks of flats, all that kind of thing, homes as well, and enabling people to charge their car. And then the bit of the business that is small, but hopefully will grow a lot in the future, is battery storage. And kind of the three are all inextricably linked, and you can see a process where the sale can be, across all three or across one individually. So a very exciting business, growing strongly. I mean, the whole area of charging battery electric vehicles is high growth, and again is one that's really coming home to roost as we speak, as you say. And I think, like you say, the benefits here are environmental, but there are some obvious health ones too. I mean, there's some research that was done last year by Harvard, Cambridge, and a couple of other universities that showed 1 in 5 deaths that happen every year happen because of dirty air, because we burn fossil fuels. Now, that's nowhere is that worse than in cities with combustion engine cars driving around. It's madness. Those exhaust fumes are not great. So, anything we can do to reduce the amount of fossil fuels we burn and get it away from dense population areas is great. So charging, renewable energy, battery electric vehicles, all that stuff will help do that, will help remove the issues from the places they need removing. And the impact there is, lots of less people in hospital with respiratory diseases, and at the end of the day, lots of less people dying. And some of the stats around the amount of people, it is frightening. Not 20% of people don't die in the UK of respiratory disease caused by fossil fuels. It's probably less than 5%. So there's countries out there in places like Southeast Asia and Africa, and it's the people who suffer most because of climate change, but in the areas that need it most, that more than half of deaths that happen a year happen because of fossil fuel burning. It's quite frightening, so just that change to getting rid of combustion engines will have a huge impact, and Alphen are helping, that to occur, along with a couple of other holdings in that area.
That's great to hear, and I can only imagine, well, short to medium term at least, demand's only going to be one way. So I mean, you guys, Artemis, you called the profit hunters. There's definitely profit to be made there, I'm sure, for the good. So, no, thank you for those examples. We'll move on, if I may. Play devil's advocate a little bit here, as I tend to do. I'm a financial advisor, so when I talk to clients, I always talk about the good things, the bad things. If you're unapologetically looking for these disruptors, these transformative companies, there's a risk involved there. What happens if they fail to disrupt, or if one of the incumbents does buck up and try and push them out of the market by improving what they do? How have you built that into your process? Are you nimble enough to react and sell out, or what do you do?
Yeah, it's the constant battle of being an investor, isn't it? You want to invest for the long term, not the short term, but you don't want to get caught in the ones that you get wrong. And there is no easy answer. We do use some screening tools. We do keep on top of every stock. I mean, it's why there's more than two. There's why there's four of us, so we can get to know the stocks deeply and intimately, so we can look out for the problems. What we've evidenced over the years is we believe the market, whatever you want to call it, the majority of investors in general believe that the big guys always win. And actually, we think the evidence is there that there's lots of Netflix examples. Let's not forget, Apple was the minnow versus Nokia for many years.
Yeah.
Tesla, both in the green or both in the areas we look and not in the area. Netflix is a classic example. I mean, I actually think they might be being disrupted by Disney. As we speak, Disney have just gone past them in terms of number of people who watch. Sorry. But, how long has that taken? That story was out there back in the early 2000s that there's no way Netflix is ever going to work. It'll get disrupted. There's no way Amazon will work. It will get disrupted by Walmart, et cetera, et cetera. These disruptors are very good at what they do. And there's a couple of reasons we believe why that is. You are focused on doing one thing, and it's a new thing that no one else is doing. So that gives you an element of purpose, something that's very important to us. It's why when we underperform, we probably don't panic as much as other people, because we are investing with a purpose. We really believe that these problems need solving, but also these companies live or die by their purpose. If Amazon had tried to pivot away, it really cared about what it was doing about e-commerce. Even when it got tough, it had nowhere else to go, and that in some ways is a power, in itself. And so there's that focus that they've got there. There's also the issues that the incumbents have. These are big companies that have to fill out lots of forms to change. I used to think of it as about the pirates versus the Navy, maybe in a positive, maybe good pirates though, not bad. It's far easier for the pirates to disrupt than it is the Navy. They've got all these forms and all these ways. And then actually, if you look at a lot of these, the obvious one example to use is the car industry, over the last 5 years. Literally building a combustion engine, which has got 15,000 parts to it, versus building an electrical engine that's got 7 parts. There's no relevant experience, these combustion. So everyone's saying, oh, look, they've been building cars for years. Tesla can never disrupt, but it's a completely different value chain. And that's what we look for when we're looking for disruption. We think the most money you can make is when it's a different value chain. So it's the smartphone versus the traditional phone. And you look back in history and you'll see Nokia. Well, we've done our research. No one wants a phone for anything other than calling and texting. They were absolutely 100% sure of it. And now we all carry a computer that's more powerful than the computers that send us to the moon, in our pocket. And
absolutely,
and it's the same with the combustion engine. You go back to as recently as 2018, you can hear on YouTube the BMW CEO whispering at the car show. It's there. These battery electric vehicles are ridiculous. Our customers have told us they're not interested. And now, within 2 years, those same customers are driving past in their Tesla waving, and they caught everyone, and it catches them time and time again. So we believe that notion, that belief that Apple will be the biggest company in the world forever, or these companies are it's just probably unlikely, and there's space for others to come up. History shows you, if you look at the top 10 holdings of the MSCI World, or the S&P 500, the end of each 10 years over the last 50 to 100 years, it's different. It's really hard to be a Coke or a McDonald's, or stay around, Exxon for many years, stay around for that long. It's really impressive to stay around. It's really tough to keep your brand fresh and on point. So there's always been disruption, there's always been change, and us as human beings don't like change because we're herd animals. And that's what we can take advantage of as investors, if we're brave enough to invest in change and take that risk. Most humans aren't brave enough to do that. It goes against the natural grain of how we imprint. We like to be in a herd. We like to be cautious, because if it's the wind that rustles 49 times and it's a lion once, you're dead.
Yeah.
And what we're really lucky as with, unfortunate, and it's an unfortunate point, is there is some really important big problems out there that need solving in protecting the environment and enhancing people's lives. There is lots of inclusionary issues, things that we're doing wrong when we're looking at healthcare and education, and the climate stuff is just so obvious. I don't need to go on and on about it. The problems, your customers know the problems, and they're not getting solved quick enough. I read a stat, it's something like 98% of mammals that aren't farm animals or us have disappeared over the last 100 years.
Oh, it's horrendous.
So forget things like climate change even, but we're seeing it now. We know that there was a 90% chance that this year's temperatures were caused by the climate. There's a 10% chance it's just random luck, but when you look at the number, and people go, oh, look at 1976. Well, you can look at the heat maps. They're completely different. It's completely different. We are in the process of exiting the age of the human in temperature reasons. So humans have progressed over the last 20,000 years because we've stayed above a certain temperature and below a certain temperature, and actually the world's been relatively stable, and we're buffeting against that, standard deviation at the top now.
These changes, they've got to happen. They've got to happen. No, you're absolutely right. I was reading the latest IPCC report, and in there it's got examples of what the world will be like at 1.5 degrees increase, 2 degrees, and then 4 degrees. And you don't want to know what the 4 degrees stuff says. So we just can't get there. So
it's funny as well. I'll dig it out if I can find it, but I found we all say, oh, but we didn't know. There was a 1912 piece about saying that burning coal, it was in the newspaper, one American newspaper, burning coal was pumping carbon into the atmosphere and changing the temperature of the world. 1912. We've known since then that it could be a problem. And people say, oh, the scientists are over cautious all the time. I mean, there's a Carl Sagan to the sort of US Senate, a speech he gave in 1970 something, it could be 78. You can get it on YouTube, and literally he talks about what will happen if we warm by 1 degree, which we've now done, and it's almost exactly what's happened. It's melting glaciers. It's not overly dramatic. It's not, if anything, it's probably a bit worse. The weather's probably got a bit worse than he predicted. So these intelligent scientists know what they're talking about. It's peer reviewed for a reason, and it's frightening.
No, it's frightening. We've all got to do a piece, and it was good to know that you're there doing your piece, and I'm here doing my piece. I think we've covered a lot of ground here. I mean, I'll just pick up if you think there's anything we've missed. But I mean, one burning question, I think you touched on the answer slightly already, but most funds are run by a fund manager, occasionally two. You guys, you've got 4 of you there running this thing. What's that all about? Why are there 4 of you?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we are the analysts and the fund managers. That's the first point is, we're all on the fund, but, we've all worked together a long time, and we think actually a team run in the right way can be a really powerful decision-making tool. So traditionally, one person's made a decision. Well, is that always the best thing to do? Maybe if a team works in the right way, you see it with sports teams all the time. The team's bigger than the individuals, and that's what we want to create. Simply, is a team that the team output and thought process is better than it would be if one person was in charge of doing it. That's the simple truth. The other point is we're looking for small and mid caps. Often they change a lot. They need a lot of work because then, the information's harder to come by. And hopefully in the future, you might see that we're not just running one product. We might be running a couple more products with the same 4 people. So there's also a view that, there's capacity there over time to do some more interesting things in the area.
So you've got your dream team. You're going to run your dream team, and you're in there doing all that mega research that you need to do. So that's good. Yeah, I mean, you could strip out, couldn't you? You could create a small cap carve out or something from this in the future, something like that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Right. I think we're about there, my friend. Unless you think there's anything I've missed from our conversation, I think we've covered quite a lot of ground, haven't we?
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you for setting it up, Haydon, and thanks for your time.
That's really good. Before I go, just anyone watching this, I need to cover myself as always. Hopefully you like what you've seen, but you are aware this is not advice. You need to get professional advice before you invest. This fund, however good it is, might not be right for you. So make sure you talk to a financial advisor. Maybe it's somebody at Good Green Money or one of the other good guys out there. There's lots of us. So do not take this as read that you need to invest in this fund until you've done that. And there's some risk warnings at the end of this video. And the last thing to say is if you like this, do subscribe to our YouTube channel where we speak to lots of good people like Neil. There's lots of good information there. And hopefully you find it useful. So there we are. Thanks again for your time, Neil. And hopefully we can catch up again soon.
Thank you, Haydon.
See you later.
Bye.